Hello. This is Irene with SaugaTalks. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening and watching and following and commenting and subscribing. I need more of those. All right. So if you're on LinkedIn, if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, all I need is to ask for thumb up. It's very important for algorithm to pick up on videos and to make this conversation available to broader audience. So please, thank you for all your support of SaugaTalks. We're discussing amazing, interesting trends and technology here every week with amazing leaders who are very, very generous with their time and their energy. Today, I'm extremely privileged. JT Giri is with me today. Hello, JT. How are you?
Hi, Irene. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm doing exceptionally well. And you know what? We're here to discuss FinOps. Let's spell out, for those who new to this discipline, to me, it's extremely exciting. It is financial management practice blending with DevOps. That's where name is coming from, right? And it's all about cloud optimization and benefits for the business as well as engineering. So why don't we listen out why FinOps, JT, why you do what you do?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back and just talk a little bit about my background. So, I was migrating companies to AWS when EC2 was in beta. And, in the beginning, we had very few servers. I remember at that time, Amazon had EC2 and one other service. Now, fast forward, AWS has 150 services, and all of them, like, you get billed some at different sort of dimensions, some for usage, some for hourly, and with per second resolution. So it's very complex. And then on top of that, you can have multiple teams provisioning resources in cloud, right? So you have people like engineers who end up doing majority of the provisioning of cloud infrastructure, and they never really see the bill. They never really have to pay the bill because it's fully streamlined. They can provision all the resources. That's why you get all this innovation, because you're not waiting for the resources. And then you have finance and procurement teams. They cannot make sense of the bill, right? As I mentioned earlier, it's very complex. You have a lot of different services, different dimensions, and it's getting billed at like every per second resolution. And it's just very hard for the business folks to kind of make sense and kind of come to a conclusion on how does that relate to the business value. So, FinOps as a principle at core is just really trying to bring in a culture, build a culture where everyone is taking accountability for their cloud spend, and teams are speaking with each other, right? Finance teams and the engineers are collaborating with each other, because end of the day, right? Why do you build infrastructure? Why do you move to cloud? Is to drive innovation. At the core, you're always trying to deliver value to your customers. So FinOps is the best way. It really provides you a framework that you can use it to operationalize that kind of culture in your organization.
Absolutely, and it's extremely important to hear the relatable story, GT, that brought you into this field. So why don't we, before we get into adoption, because any transformation, any business initiative needs adoption framework, needs approach, needs the right team, all that. Before we get into some details, could you maybe spell out some benefits? You mentioned a few, right? But both business side, engineering side, all the ecosystem, why people need to know more about FinOps today.
I think what we're seeing right now, especially as just what's happening in the market, a lot of companies are trying to optimize their spend, and cloud spend is pretty high up there, as far as the overall, uh, you know, the costs on the P&L. So there's a lot of interest from a lot of organizations to optimize their cloud spend and make sure it's aligned with their business needs, right? I think it's important to understand that the business needs, business requirements change all the time, and cloud infrastructure needs to adopt to kind of match the business requirements. And so, I think this is one of the reasons, right? It's a primary driver that we're seeing in the market right now. And once you are able to kind of bring in this FinOps culture, and once you can operationalize it, now all of a sudden, engineers all of a sudden are working on optimizing the spend, and finance teams, everyone's working together towards the same goal to see how they can align the infrastructure with the business needs.
You mentioned is crucial because it's not an IT spend anymore. It's not their budget. It's definitely shared cross-functional budget. So CFO, when looking at the expenses quarterly, monthly, weekly, right, they really have to understand what FinOps is, right? Why engineers asking for these budgets, right? Where are they going? What kind of metrics? What kind of measurements? Absolutely. So why don't we jump into the adoption? What's the right angle? What's the right conversation to have within the organization?
Yeah, maybe I'll touch on one of your points, right? You mentioned something about finance team needs reports, and one of the principles of FinOps framework is that data reports should be accessible and timely. That data sometimes is not accessible, and platforms like FinOps make it easy for people to easily get that data in a format that people are used to, so they can make decisions. But I digress. Sorry. You asked the question about the adoption, right? So FinOps has 3 phases: inform, operate, and optimize. We could start with inform first. As Peter Drucker said, you can't improve if you can't measure. Everything starts with this, looking at where do you stand, building a baseline on where you stand. So inform phase is critical. And I also think that all these 3 phases, you have to leverage automation. The more you can leverage automation, the more you can focus on building, cool technology on cloud, and not have to worry about spending all this time, on analyzing cloud spend. So, in the inform stage, what we see is primarily, if you look at deck of cards, you have 52 cards. You can have them in different stacks, but end of the day, you still have only 52 cards, right? So essentially, you're doing that, right? You're looking at your cloud bill. You're putting it in different buckets. Here, this is production, this is R&D, this is utility, and this is called Showback. So essentially, you're showing different teams, and how much is the cloud spend is driven by their or managed by their team, right? End of the day, you should not have any unallocated costs. And this needs to be done near real time. FinOps does this, where we have Showback dashboards, where as the infrastructure is changing, we show you hey, in this bucket, we see you have this much unallocated costs. And also, there's another phenomena, Irene, people sometimes don't, name the resources the right way and things like that. So you have to leverage machine learning to make sure you group the right resources together. But that's normally a starting point. That's where, when we work with companies, just looking at building a Showback dashboards and just allocating all the costs is a good starting point. The second phase is optimize, and this is where FinOps could help quite a bit. So we have a commitment management for AWS. And this is one of the areas where, we believe that engineers should be like working on, building stuff as opposed to understanding AWS pricing plan. So we free up engineers so they don't have to worry about, buying and selling the RIs. We provide risk-free commitment management where we automatically buy and maximize the RI coverage. So let's say you're moving to the latest and greatest technology. AWS has new processors, Graviton processors. We see a lot of customers adopting that. As you move to new type of workloads, we automatically start covering the new type of workloads, and you don't have to worry about not moving because you committed to old technology. So we do that automatically. This is an area like I really think that a lot of companies should focus on, just automating, as much as they can, so the engineers can focus on innovation. Under optimize phase, you're constantly looking to optimize the spend, make sure it's aligned with the business needs. We have a scheduler where first of all, we use machine learning to look at the usage behavior of an application, and then we are leveraging AWS Event Bridge to automatically pause resources when you're not using them. So that's the true benefit of cloud, right? That's the reason you move to cloud. So and a lot of our customers find that extremely helpful. Again, the theme here is we're leveraging automation. So the infrastructure is automatically optimized with the business needs. And lastly, we also look at customers' container optimization, container utilization. And we have an agent that we deploy into customers' environment, and based on our findings, we send pull requests. And our pricing model is very simple. Customers only have to pay if we optimize their spend. So everything we do is based on percentage of the savings. So we're always looking for ways to optimizing customer spend. And the last phase of FinOps is operate. So where like how do you maintain a cloud backlog? How do you prioritize? This is how we see most of the customers adopting FinOps framework.
Why don't we talk about maturity now? Because I'm sure you've seen customers who can crawl, maybe some can walk, and maybe some can run. So what are the good indications for organization to start crawling in FinOps first, right? And what's the majority of customers, how fast they get to walking before they're really running and really, progressing with their maturity?
Yeah, I think, this is an area where we work with a lot of customers. What we see is like just getting an understanding of how resources are tagged, making sure there's no unallocated cost. And that's like what we've seen is a good starting point. It's a crawl phase where now you have a good handle of your cloud spend. And then, to us, walk and run is where now walk is when you're leveraging automation to manage some of these manual tasks, whether that be buying RIs, whether that be optimizing spend automatically, or optimizing resources automatically. And we see few teams, maybe one team, adopting automation first, and as it becomes easier and easier, other teams start replicating it in different teams as well. So yeah, to us, those are the stages, right? Just starting with the baseline of where things stand right now, and start leveraging automation and bring in more teams to replicate the success.
Let's move on maybe to some challenges. What are the barriers for adoption? We cannot be just rah-rah, how wonderful the technology is. Let's talk about challenges that you have to handle within client organizations.
Yeah, the challenges we see is, the way I believe that we can drive bigger impact here is by providing better technology, by providing better automation to developers and engineers, and if we don't do that, then we're it's not easy for developers to take actions, right? So one of the challenges we see right now is, there's like recommendations, right? You get recommendations like, oh, you should do this, you should do this, and but engineers maybe don't have the bandwidth to take action on those recommendations. And this is where we spend a lot of time. This is where we spend most of our energy. To make things a lot easier, so engineers could take actions easily. So, like on our commitment management, is totally risk-free commitment where engineers don't even have to worry about it. On the scheduler, we leverage machine learning to understand the pattern, and we make a case that based on our patterns, we think this could be like stopped for these 4 hours. Click here to do so. I feel like if the experience is not as easy, like companies struggle to take actions, and kind of drive the maturity level. So, I think we have to keep on stay focused on building a better experience as an industry, so we can empower engineers to take actions.
Why don't we get to some FinOps capabilities? So I'm learning a lot about FinOps these days. So we talked a little bit about cost allocation. What are the top critical, again, capabilities clients should think about? You mentioned Showback, forecasting, budget management. There's a lot to understand for those who will be implementing. So any critical capabilities business and technical leaders need to know about?
Yeah, I think Showback is so important because over and over, like as we are working with customers, we look at the environment, resources are not tagged the right way, or they're tagged one way in one environment, another way in another environment, and most of the time, companies just don't have a handle on like how are they spending their money on cloud, right? To me, the Showback is the starting point. This is where we get a lot of aha moments when we're working with customers. Sometimes, I've been on calls where like customers like, oh my God, this was a test environment. We're supposed to kill it a while back, right? It's still here. And yeah, we see a lot of those scenarios. So that's why Showback, especially if you do it right with tool, like we make it super easy in FinOps where we try to allocate everything in one bucket. And when you go through that exercise, you find so many resources that maybe you forgot to shut down or they belong in a different category. So I think it's, Irene, I would say, like, I highly recommend everyone to like build sort of a Showback type of strategy in their organization.
Excellent. And what I love discussing with my guests here is the future. Okay, we talked a lot about practical advices for organizations, for technology and business leaders here. FinOps, as you mentioned, is getting more and more prevalent this year. Right? But where do you think this will go in 5 years? Okay, can we play a little bit the visionary card? Where do you see maybe machine learning, AI helping more to automate some of the practices? So let's just paint that picture. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I hope so. I think, yeah, fast forward 5 years, like I do see a lot more ML and AI just looking at the usage pattern and then making recommendations. And then, where we spend a lot of time is like, yes, machine learning could maybe make good recommendations based on the usage pattern. How do you take action? That's the hardest part. How do you build an experience where there are checks and balances before the recommendations get approved? For example, our Kubernetes integration, we send a pull request, and in the pull request, customer could approve the pull request. A developer could approve the pull request or reject the pull request, right? That way, they decide if they like the recommendations or not. I see that's where we're heading. Going more to developer first experience, sending engineers the pull request and the recommendations, and that way, we are part of the the flow that developers are used to, and they don't have to think twice and come back and try to make changes. That's the future. That's where we
That's the
spend most of our
future, and
time.
hopefully making better decisions, right?
Right.
With all the insights, right? With all the information, data available. But yeah, it's just data sitting out there unless people making the right decisions.
Absolutely. I think this is the biggest challenge, and we'll solve it. And the industry will solve it. There will be more and more innovative companies that will keep on leveraging the data and provide recommendations and make it easy for people to take action.
What a bright future, right? You're going to be part of. Absolutely. JT, thank you so very much for your time today. Can we please finish with few takeaways? Because we did talk about the definition of FinOps for those who may be new. At the same time, adoption, making sure it makes sense for organization. At the same time, taking all the business benefits. So what kind of takeaways you think we should leave our audience with?
Just, I would say, leverage more automation. The more automation you can leverage, you can free up your resources from, like, they can focus on building new stuff and delivering value to your customers. Start with Showback, allocate all the cost in different buckets and different business units, and leverage a platform like FinOps. I would highly recommend that because we have an interesting pricing model. We only charge if we optimize your spend. So the platform is completely free. And it's important to us because it drives focus on our side. Like you mentioned, Irene, earlier, recommendations are recommendations if no one takes action. So we spend all of our energy focused on, like, how do we make our recommendations, and how do we like produce effective recommendations, and how do we make it easy so developers actually take action. And we track that. That's like one of the metrics we track, like how much money are we optimizing for the customers. So yeah, leverage automation. Try out tool like FinOps. It's completely free.
Beautiful. We'll include links. So I encourage everyone, try. According to JT, it's free. Okay. I've seen their free demos. There are a bunch of resources from FinOps team. I've seen blogs, I've seen videos, fantastic webinars. So I encourage everyone to follow on LinkedIn FinOps, to contact JT if you, again, interested to learn more. I'm sure he has lots of experts who can spell out anything and everything we talked about today. And we have few more minutes. I want to finish with bonus question, JT, if you're ready. A challenge question. Okay.
Sure.
So what kind of skills and expertise would people need in organization to run successfully FinOps? I'm talking about careers. I'm talking about what kind of talent people will need to think about, right, to be really successful. Because while we talked about engineers, we talked about financial managers, right? So it's like any engineer need to know about FinOps, or where do company find the best talent, you think?
Yeah, I think it starts with curiosity on, like, how do we I think if you're an engineer, you already have an advantage, and you just need to start adopting and understanding how much, what you're provisioning, how much does it cost, how is it built, how to optimize it. And as you as you start to pay attention to that, I think that will set you apart. And one of the things you could do is, get FinOps practitioner certified. And I remember going through like similar journey. I was like a sysadmin, and all of a sudden, sysadmin turned into like a DevOps. Because sysadmin was kind of behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Just
it's a natural progression, of course, right? What
Yeah,
used
but
to be CSAT, but now DevOps.
yeah,
Yep.
all of a sudden, that kind of career path changed. We were like from sysadmin, we were closely working with the engineering team to make sure that we deploy the code. I think the same path is here, right? Like as engineers, like starting point will be to educate yourself, get FinOps certification. Start with practitioner. Now you understand a little bit more, and you'll start engaging with finance. And I think that's the best path.
Yeah, it sounds exciting to me, making such a difference in the business, because again, cloud costs can be debilitating, okay, for small teams, for medium-sized teams, for organizations of large size, all right? So it's very important to be in the center of it and get a hold of it, and there is technology now. So JT, thank you so much for presenting FinOps, for talking some of the critical benefits for the business, and just making this very exciting for more people to know about it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.